You are listening to The Growth Signal. My name is Alyssa Nolte,
And I'm David DeWolf.
and we're going to get right into it. David, what is your hot take?
Yeah, I think the revolution that has hit us from sales ops to RevOps has actually totally failed. And I think it's failed because we have ignored everything post sale and we don't drive with data and discipline our revenue cycles within our commercial accounts the same way that we do before the sale happens. Yet 80%, 85% of our revenue comes from those existing accounts.
I just had a conversation via LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, kind of about a tangential version of this hot
Okay.
take, because I come from the sales side. So I will admit to, always being on the front end of that deal, great immense respect for the people on the post sale side. And one of the things that I see, and I've said this statement over and over again, I'm sure you've heard it too. It's easier to to keep a client than to get a new one. And I was having this conversation on LinkedIn because I think that that phrase has done so much damage
Mhm.
to our post-sales motions, right? If
Totally.
it's easier to keep a client and then you lose one, well, you just failed like the bunny slope. Like you're not
Mhm.
ready for the black diamond trail. And I think it reflects in how we support the people who are in those roles, the types of enablement sales gets versus customer success gets. And I
Totally.
think that that mentality, even if we go into it with the right attitude of we're going to focus on retention, we don't give it the same level of respect and support and resources that we have been giving and continue to give to acquisition.
Yeah, and the biggest flaw that I see in all of that is that because in so many cases we consider it relational, we consider it a soft discipline versus a hard discipline. And if you look at all the advancements that RevOps have brought to us, it's all about rigor and discipline and running a machine. What we do post sale is we manage relationships and it gets soft. We miss growth signals because of it. We're not actively managing our commercial profit and our commercial revenue and making sure that we have that same level of discipline that is oriented by the actual data. What is the data telling us? And because of that, and because it's relational, we allow that natural bias and human element to really influence it. And we all remember the sales world before we had the data, right? We were doing the same things and we didn't have discipline and we didn't have exit criteria and all of those things. I think the post sale world is really stuck in that mode right now. And we're soft because of it. Our net revenue retention should be 120 to 140%. And most times we're celebrating 110%. And many firms operate below 100%. We got to fix that.
So let's get into the brass tacks then. How do we take our post-sales mindset and resources and activities and rigor and turn them into something that's real and that actually works and isn't just, a pipe dream?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is that we all know the old adage, you manage what you measure. One of the fundamental problems is we do not measure commercial health the way that we should, right? If you go around, over 90% of firms still use red, yellow, green on a spreadsheet in order to report the health of an account. That makes no sense in this modern AI driven world where we can actually understand human language. So, what's great about a commercial account that exists is I have a relationship. What is the digital exhaust of that relationship? It's not transactions, right? It's not clicks on a website, it's actual conversation. And that conversation is so rich, it's so full of insight, but we're not tapping it. So we have got to use a modern commercial intelligence platform in order to actually take these conversations. Think your emails, your video call transcripts, your Slack messages. How do you turn all of that into actionable intelligence? I'm talking real hardcore measures, real signals of what's going on so that you can then do your line by line and look through account by account and say specifically, what are we going to do to turn this around based on what the data says, not just what some account manager thinks the health of the account is because they have one good relationship.
I think that's really, really important. I am going to ask you though, because one of the things that I hear a lot of pushback is like privacy. Right. So, okay,
Sure.
I was in a consulting arrangement with a huge enterprise company, and they were implementing a solution that would essentially read their email.
Mhm.
to pull in data for their their Salesforce CRM instance, right? And the idea was to take the human element out of getting those things out of email and into places where people can use them.
Right.
And half of the company was like, cool, this is going to save me time and effort. And half of the company was like, I don't want you reading my email. So, how do we square the human reaction to the amazing things that AI solutions like this can do? And
Yeah.
what's that change management look like to bring people on board and show them, yes, maybe it feels a little weird, but it ultimately is better for you and helps you be better?
To me, there's two aspects of this. Okay. The very first one is we have to realize where we are already. How many times do we get in a video conference and before we even show up, we're already recording it, we're capturing it? That data already exists. We're capturing it and it's sitting. Go to email and use email as an example. How many cyber tools are already scanning every single one of our emails, right? But we have confidence that it's doing something for us that is worth it. The problem is in this post sale world, we're not used to driving off of data and reality, right? In a sales world, we've gotten so addicted to it that we mandate the implementation of Gong or Chorus or something to help us to advance the the sales techniques that we have. Well, if we get that same mindset and we acknowledge where we already are, that we're already doing these things, we're just going to start using it instead of just letting it sit in a data warehouse somewhere. I think that's the first step. The second one I think is really, really important. That is, this is all about change. Let's look at the way we did this when gongs first started coming out. We had to go talk to any CRO that was early on in 2018, 2019, trying to roll out gong. Same things. Here's what you find. You find the top 20% of sellers actually love it because they get tidbits from it, they get better, and they love getting better. The next 50% are kind of defensive about it. They kind of feel weird. Somebody's looking over the shoulder. And the bottom 30% are low performers and they're all out, not defensive. They're offensive about it, right? They're like, get it out of here. Well, anytime you start to change something and you introduce something like this, you're going to get that same spread. And I think that's what we're feeling in the post sales world right now. People who are not used to this type of rigor and discipline are reacting to it. This takes leadership, and the leadership has to be a vision from the top down of why this is good, but it also has to be things like psychological safety. How do we make sure that everybody understands that we're doing this for the purpose of actually equipping you to do your job better? Because we want to give you better tools to perform better, that we're all in it together, and that this isn't just a report card of you, but there are things that go into client relationships that you may not even have control over, but are going to help you do your job better. And I think if we have stronger leaders that are willing to change manage and acknowledge where we already are, those are the three steps that we have to take in order to drive it.
When you're thinking about actually implementing, all of this data-driven stuff that we're talking about, are there universal data sources or signals that people should be tapping into that they're not already? Or is it more complex than that? Do we all have different signals and data sources and ways of interpreting it? How do we
Yes.
do this?
Yes, both. Okay. Now, stop and start thinking about what already exists and is common. Over 85% of data, just according to research 2 years ago, in an enterprise was in your email. And it was just untapped. It wasn't part of the modern data stack. Now, I suspect that's gone down fairly significantly, especially with the advent of all of these video transcripts and call recordings, right? That's taking it over. But I would suggest that those two sources, and maybe if you were to add in Slack as well, if you have external Slack channels with your customers, probably gets us to 80% of the context that we need. And what we have found in our own research is in order to provide a directionally correct signal on the health of an account, it only requires about 30% of the data. Everything over and above that just gives you higher fidelity intelligence. And so I would start with that commonality. And then after that, you can start tapping into project management tools. You can tap into ticketing systems, right? Customer support type things, those types of things. But I think if we just start with the basics, the problem is we have such a dearth of information and data right now that even taking the first step in the easy stuff is a massive step forward.
And I think too, there is a little bit of caution that I would love to throw out there and get your take on because There's a lot of well-intentioned leaders out there, and I'm sure you talked with them as well, who are ready to go all in on data-driven decision making and data strategy, and they do it in a way that's like, "Let's just dump everything in, and we'll collect everything, we'll pull it all in, and everything is important, and everything is useful, and, okay, yes, we only need 30%, but let's get 100%." And then I watch them spin and spin and spin, and it's almost like this data overwhelm takes what could be really useful and really interesting and really valuable
Yep.
to, like, that almost like that stomach ache when you eat too much at a buffet.
Well, and I'll take that a step further. I think one of the things, the way you framed that, you talked about data-oriented decision making. Well, that's well and good, but I see a lot of leaders start with actual solution, which is data, right? Which is more technology. Let's actually start with the problem. And the problem is net revenue retention. And the question, if we want to increase our net revenue retention, is what drives retention and growth in our accounts, right? So you don't just start with the data, you actually start with the problem statement. And then from retention and growth, we can go and say, well, we actually know from research what drives retention and growth in these enterprise accounts. And it comes down to three fundamental things. There are three things that are really, really hard to measure, but it's doable now because of it. The first one is the perception of service quality. What's really important here is that word perception, because way too many firms measure their service quality, but it doesn't actually matter. What matters is how is it received? How is it perceived by the client? Number two is the strength of the interpersonal relationship. We've got to be able to measure not just buyer to account manager, not just executive sponsor to executive sponsor, but the entire B2B relationship. What does it look like? And are you knitting a fabric of strength between the two companies? And that is the second factor. And then the third factor is the degree of alignment between the service provider and the client. If you look at all of those things, I said the degree of alignment, the strength of interpersonal relationship, the perception, all of these things are very nuanced. And this is where the natural language actually helps us out. This isn't transactions that is a black and white answer. This is the very definition of inference. And this is historically what humans have done in a flawed way. A great client partner account manager has this gut feeling that an account is going off track. So they're going to say, hey, instead of green, I'm going to score this as yellow, or I'm going to score it as red. Well, now what the data can do is we can look at that research, we can decompose each one of those categories into very specific topics of where does the perception of service quality come from? And now we can interrogate the data or the natural language information flows that already exist that would contain those signals in them. And we can look for specific things. And do you see how we got to a point of what you said of starting with just, this 30%, this 40% of the data, but we got there from the top down based on the data we needed. We didn't get there from the bottom up of give me all the data and I'm going to start asking it random questions. It was very specific question. Because I want net revenue retention, I'm going to understand the drivers of growth and retention. And because I understand that, I'm going to get to the three drivers that drive it. And then I'm going to find the data and query it specifically for that. Those are the two different approaches that lead to success here. And then I would be amiss if I didn't mention the other piece leaders have to really pay attention to is you can't just have data and let it sit on the sidelines. You have to operationalize it. And that means building the management system around how do you leverage that data? So critical, so essential. You would be shocked. Maybe you wouldn't, but I just still can't believe it. How many organizations I go into post sales and there isn't a management cadence. It is, we've got great people and they do a good job. Maybe we have a QBR cadence and this and that, but we don't have a weekly account review meeting where we go line by line and look at the top 5 accounts whose scores have dipped. Those types of things really, really matter. And again, this represents over 80% of the average firm's revenue, right? It comes from existing accounts, not from new logos.
I think too, and I have a whole page of notes of things I want to come back to because you said so many incredible things in that. I think also people listening to this will be surprised at just how bad it is, even in the biggest companies that you admire. Like you go
Totally.
into some of these huge billion-dollar enterprise companies and you're like, they've got it figured out. They're big dogs for a reason. You're like, oh my gosh, you are worse than the plumber down the street who puts it into a spreadsheet, because at least he puts it into a spreadsheet. You're
That's right.
not doing anything at all. So anyway, if you're hearing this and you're feeling panic that you haven't solved this yet, you are not alone. But the good news is that I think with AI, we are seeing huge leaps and bounds in not only the ability to do all of the things that you were talking about, but people are really understanding the mindset of it. And I want to key in on everything that you talked about, how difficult it is to measure and to quantify originally, right? So when I think about that really incredible, account manager who just had that gut feel, and
Mhm.
then that person leaves and you lose all that institutional knowledge and understanding of that customer, and we now have the ability to take what was unquantifiable and difficult to transfer and put it into a system and solution that allows us all to have kind of that quick start approach
That's
to that relationship. Now there's always gonna be that rock star who is better. This isn't going to bring you
right.
up to their level. They're still gonna be amazing. They're just gonna be, that much more amazing.
Right.
But I think previous to our AI revolution, measuring perception and combining it with that strength of that measurement of that strength of that interpersonal relationship and connected to the alignment between the 2 companies and that degree of alignment, those were not super measurable
They weren't at
previously.
all.
Like, we
Yeah.
did our best with our red, yellow, green health scores, and we all kinda
Right.
knew that they sucked. So, if someone is hearing this and they are feeling that call to arms, they're feeling that call to action, they're ready to actually solve the problem and not just throw data at it, what is the one thing they need to do right away that they can do immediately to start down this path?
Yeah. I mean, I think the really easy thing to do is to step back and build that management cadence, right? Like I said, you can have all the data in the world, but if you're not driving discipline with it and making data oriented decisions with it, then you're struggling. And so, yes, you need the data platform, right? And that's what we do at Known Well, right? Is we've done all this research because we are driving this type of intelligence and helping to operationalize it. But what we find is organizations that don't have the basic roles and responsibilities really, really clear of who's accountable for what, that don't have the meeting cadence that's defined. Um, Go to knownwell.com and download. We have a workbook that will help you establish the appropriate meeting cadence for your business, right? Do those types of things that just put that discipline in place, and then go find your data provider that can actually use real research to interrogate the information you already have. And these days, you'd be shocked how easy it is. 15 minutes of time, we can get the system connected and it will produce great intelligence for you in 3 days. That's how far these platforms have come, where it's now right there for you. So start with the hard work of getting that meeting cadence in place and then pull the trigger on that data platform and pull it in.
Would you say that too many people default right to a technology solution and forget that there's a
100%.
management solution? Like, I've seen a number of people who just buy a solution and say, "Oh, well, I bought this technology and it will magically fix all my problems."
Totally. That's 100% correct. Yes. You've got to operationalize it. And that operationalization, it seems really, really simple. And it kind of is, to be honest. But simple and easy aren't the same thing. And what it takes is discipline. One of the things that I believe is that if you look at what has happened with the sales ops revolution becoming the RevOps revolution, sales and marketing leaders have figured out that they have to have an operator within their organization. Customer success, account management, they don't have operators, right? And so you don't have that person to own the system, to bring the data to the meeting, to really drive it. And I think that's really telling about the immaturity of this post-sales world, is we haven't gotten there yet. And so I think organizations that just go pull a trigger and build a platform, they have great intent, but they need to really pull through that change management and make sure that people are empowered with the data, they know what to do with the data, and that it's actually driving decisions and actions. You've got to change behavior with it. It just can't be available yet. Only the heroes use it.
Considering all of the people that you know or aspire to know, who else is out there? Who else should we be paying attention to?
Yeah. Brian Shea is one. Brian is an expert in sales and sales enablement and really on top of the research around all of these things and speaks a lot about this evolution of the sales enablement, the RevOps world, and moving more and more into the client accounts. And I think he just has phenomenal research and insights. That's one person that I'd point.
If someone is really connecting with you, they wanna learn more, they wanna follow along, where can they find you online?
Go to knownwell.com. You can find me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, or daviddewolf.com is my personal blog. Go to any of those and check out Knownwell and what we're doing.
And you can find me on LinkedIn, Alyssa Nolte. Search the Alyssa Nolte, and if you see the Notorious Plant Killer, you will know that you found the right Alyssa Nolte. I also have a Substack, search Alyssa Likes to Talk, and you can find the link to that newsletter in our show notes. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for really bringing us through what the future of post sale needs to look like. Not what it's going to look like, not what it should look like, but what it absolutely needs to look like. I loved this conversation.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.